You are Locked On Braves POSTCAST, part of Locked On Sports Atlanta, your team every day.
Hello and welcome into the Braves POSTCAST. Grant McAuley alongside Jake Mastroianni here as we go through and try to make sense of one of the more, I'll go ahead and say, forgettable and frustrating days that the Braves have had in 2024. Maybe one of the most forgettable in a long time based on the injury news the Braves received, not just a loss to start the second half of the season. That, at this point, almost feels secondary. Of course, the Braves POSTCAST is part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Hit that thumbs up button. Subscribe to Locked On Sports Atlanta here on YouTube. Subscribe to Locked On Braves wherever you get your podcasts. Make sure to make us your first listen. If you already do that, we appreciate it. Before we get into everything that went on for the Atlanta Braves on a very busy Sunday, today's episode brought to you by Booking.com. The right stay can make you a fan of any city, even your rivals. Check out Booking.com for your stay today. Jake, there's going to be a couple of stays on the injured list for some very important Braves. Max Fried, we knew that going into the morning when the Braves announced that, heading into the game, that was going to be a reality. As we'll unpack some of that, may not be the worst news in the world, but certainly not helpful. But by the time the game was over in the ninth inning when Ozzie Albies broke his left wrist, this day went from bad to worse in all the ways that the Braves were hoping to avoid as they try to get things together for the second half.
Not the way you want to start the second half, although the first game of this series was a lot of fun, and it seemed like maybe things were going to turn around, but it was straight downhill from there. Losing the series, losing Max Fried for whatever amount of time that is, and then losing Ozzie Albies at the end of game 3. Again, wanted to get things going in a different direction in the second half, get on a roll winning-wise, also staying healthy, something they weren't able to do in the first half either, and it just seems like more of the same.
Yeah, 6-2 loss for the Braves on Sunday in the series finale after splitting the doubleheader against the Cardinals on Saturday. Of course, the rainout on Friday. We saw that the pitching plans have been adjusted a bit, Jake, and I don't think anybody was necessarily, altogether alarmed to see that the Braves shuffled their rotation. I know that we didn't really think much of it going into or coming out of yesterday's action as well, with Spencer Schwellenbach getting the start in the finale, just thinking, okay, well, you just move Max Fried back. You take advantage of the 27th man. That's something the Braves have tried to do when they've had to. And, of course, they've dipped down on the farm to, mix guys in and keep this rotation on track or the way that they want it to be. So I didn't really have any alarm bells that went off. But, of course, early before the game on Sunday morning, the Braves announcing that they were placing Max Fried on the injured list with what they're calling neuritis in his left forearm, something that he felt prior to the All-Star game in the most rudimentary of stretching exercises, and ultimately was able to get through an inning there, but it just seemed to be a lingering, bothersome deal. I'll go ahead and take really all of the wondering out of it. He got the MRI done. The MRI was clean. Structurally, everything's fine. Max Fried talked after the game, said that he feels as good as one can, but frustrated, obviously, to miss time. But, Jake, as far as things go, there's never a good time for an injury. And this tests an already, I think, over-tested Braves pitching staff as a whole, let alone the starting rotation that has operated for the majority of this year without their opening day starter, Spencer Strider.
And yet they've been the thing that's carried this Braves team throughout the season. And now you take the one thing that has really held this team together since the end of April, the reason they've been able to be a 500 baseball team since that point, and now you take out one of the key pieces in that. And look, it's understandable for Braves fans to be a little bit concerned and worried about this team going forward. Now, again, as you said, everything came back clean on all the test results for Max Fried. So you hope it's not anything long, but anytime you just hear the word forearm, even if it's just a nerve that's in that vicinity, it's going to make you feel very, very worried. And obviously the Braves want to be extra cautious with him in this, but not something you want, again, for something that's been a huge strength for this team and the pitching staff that's really had to carry this Braves team through most of this season. And now you're losing your ace.
Well, hearing from Brian Snitker before the game earlier this morning when I was at the ballpark, and then seeing and hearing Max Fried's comments afterwards, it does seem that there is a certain air of relief, I guess, that it wasn't a major thing. And clearly a clean MRI will go a long way towards making you feel at least a little bit better about it. But again, no good time for an injury. But to compound matters, by the end of their 6-2 defeat at the hands of the St. Louis Cardinals on Sunday, the Ozzie Albies news, it looked like it was going to be serious, whatever the case. He came across the bag looking to put a tag on, taking that throw from Travis d'Arnaud. It kind of carried him a bit towards the runner. Just one of those freak plays where it just seems like Ozzie Albies, this has happened to him several times in the last few years. it's not of his own doing. It's nothing that he's doing wrong. He just seems to be a magnet for these kinds of things that have gone wrong for him. It's been a broken toe, a broken pinky, a broken foot, and now a broken wrist. Just not the news that you needed, but I guess I'll put all that to the side for a moment and we'll talk about it. But I do want to say this because I think it's worth throwing out there. While there is no good time for an injury and the Braves don't need any more of them, the fact that it happened before the trade deadline at least gives Atlanta a little bit of a window to assess what the club can do. Whereas if this happened, 12 days from now, 13 days from now, you'd pretty much be hung out there to dry with only internal options. And while Nacho Alvarez is certainly one of those, and we can get to him, at least they have some time to assess this thing, right?
Yeah, if you want to look at it with some sort of positive, I guess, to take out of the day, it's that you do have, was it 8-9 days now to address the situation and maybe go out and get something. But you were talking about, I know I was talking about it just before the weekend, that priority number one needed to be finding an outfield bat, somebody to play every day. And I felt like the pitching staff was in a pretty good shape, that you really didn't even have to go out and get an arm if you didn't want to. And, again, hopefully Max Fried is back soon, but it is so close to the deadline, kind of to your point. I don't know that you can take that chance. I don't know if you can take that risk now. You almost have to go out and at least get some sort of depth for the rotation in case, this is more of a major thing for Max Fried, or in case somebody else gets injured along the way. You just don't know after that trade deadline. There's no easy way to go out and make upgrades. So at least now you do have that chance. You have that time. We have more of a timeline for Ozzie Albies and knowing when he'll be back, looking like 8 weeks at this point. But again, you do have a week and a half here to try to at least get some more depth in case these guys aren't able to come back, or in case you do have some other injuries. Alex Anthopoulos is going to be very, very busy. You went from, looking like maybe you just need to fill one big hole as a trade deadline to now you might need to fill up to 3.
Yeah, and I do feel like, if you're making a list, Alex Anthopoulos was going to have more than just outfield help on there. He was going to look at ways to supplement the pitching staff. And if it made sense for the Braves, like he did a year ago, they had a historic lineup. They don't have that this year, but he was still looking at maybe adding another bat at the trade deadline. That's something he's talked about, after the fact. So by some very simple deduction, if you have a pretty good pitching staff and you have a chance to make it even better, why wouldn't you already be tempted to do that if you find the right deal? But of course, if and the right deal are the operative word and or phrases in that whole statement, and the Braves are going to have to figure that out. And not only are they looking for outfield and pitcher, now second base is a bit of a question. We'll talk more about Nacho Alvarez, but he is going to be coming up, it looks like, to make his major league debut on Monday against the Cincinnati Reds. He's lit the world on fire in AAA. I wasn't totally sure, just based on a hot start, if he was completely ready. And I think the Braves wanted to give him more developmental time. But Jake, desperate times call for desperate measures. I don't know if this is desperate, but it's certainly necessary.
It is necessary. Look, he's the only real, I don't want to say viable option. It's the only option that you have out there, I think, that gives you a chance to still have a good bat in the lineup. And Nacho Alvarez, the Zach Short thing, it was fun for a little while, but that obviously kind of flamed out. Luke Williams, just kind of more of that, if somebody gets hurt during a game situation, you bring him in there, or for a game or two. But Nacho Alvarez is the only guy the Rays really have that can come in and fill in for somebody that's going to be out for, close to 2 months at this point. And you just hope that what you've seen in AAA, where it's not just the batting average, it's the power that's really shot up at AAA. And that was the one question for him coming into the season is, does he have the power? The hit tool's there. The plate discipline is there. He walked 3 times on Sunday. So it could be, obviously you don't want to lose Ozzie Albies and the power that he brings, but it does give you at least another bat in the lineup. Again, assuming that things translate, and it is the hardest jump to make from AAA to the major leagues. But assuming that type of bat and skill set translate, you could be looking at a guy that can get on base, can steal some bases as well. Never played second before, at least professionally, so that's going to be a bit of adjustment for him. But I'm excited to see what the kid can do.
Yeah, and I think the Braves, you temper your expectations a little bit, but in terms of just anticipating what this player can be and the projectability, and obviously they were high on him. He was around in big league camp this spring, and the Braves were impressed with what they saw there, but it didn't feel like he was necessarily knocking on the door. And when you came to camp, it didn't seem like he really had a place to play, to be knocking on the door, to push the discussion too much. Orlando Arcia's offense notwithstanding, there hasn't really been an overall push where you felt like this was an inevitability. It was still kind of, if they decide the time is right, maybe they make this move. If not, they'll continue to let him develop. But he goes from 7 extra base hits and 170 at bats in Double-A Mississippi to 7 home runs in 28 AAA games. I don't know what went on there. Maybe it's the best hitting environment that he's ever been in, because I know Mississippi's not necessarily that. But either way, the Braves would love to see his on-base skills be the thing that carries him at the big league level, because you need guys getting on base so that the Braves, who have suddenly managed to power up some, can finally turn those home runs into maybe more than just solo shots, which was one of the things that went wrong this weekend, and one of the things that certainly didn't serve them well in the 6-2 loss on Sunday. We are going to get back to talking about that. We will, of course, discuss more about the Ozzie Albies and Max Fried injuries, what that means, some trade speculation, the debut of Nacho Alvarez, perhaps as soon as Monday, what it sounds like it will be, and get you ready for that series against the Cincinnati Reds. All of that is going to be coming your way as the Braves postcast continues. Summer travel is heating up, especially travel for baseball games, so it's time to explore those U.S. cities you always secretly wanted to learn more about. We're talking about your rival cities. With hotels, bed and breakfast, vacation rentals, and resorts, and so much more, on Booking.com, you might just find your perfect stay, even in your baseball rival cities. You can find those hotels that overlook the stadiums, family-friendly resorts. Booking.com has so many choices across the U.S. for your summer travel this MLB season. The right stay can make you a fan of any U.S. city, even your rivals. Book today on Booking.com on the site, or you can use the Booking.com app. Prize Picks is America's #1 daily fantasy sports app with over 5 million active members, so get in on that daily action with your friends and become part of the Prize Picks community today. You can now win up to 100 times your money on Prize Picks with as little as 4 correct picks. You can turn $10 into $1,000. Prize Picks available in more than 30 states across the country, including California, Texas, and right here in Georgia. Download the Prize Picks app today. Use the code. It's LOCKEDONMLB. You get a first deposit match of up to $100. That's code LOCKEDONMLB on Prize Picks for a deposit match up to $100. Pick more, pick less. It's that easy with Prize Picks. Well, Jake, let's talk a little bit about the game that unfolded on Sunday around and bookended really with the injury news that the Braves are having to deal with. Then, of course, we'll get back into that discussion. Atlanta, though, a 6-2 loss to the St. Louis Cardinals, and thus dropped 2 out of 3 in their first series out of the All-Star break. That, of course, not the momentum that they were looking for. The Cardinals with 6 runs on 9 hits, no errors for St. Louis, 5 men left on base, and the Cards improved to 52-47. It was a critical series for them as they're looking to hold on to their spot just behind the Braves in the wild card standings. Braves dropped to 54-44 with 2 runs, 9 hits, 1 error, left 6 men on base. Losing pitcher Spencer Schwellenbach drops to 3-5 on the year, while Miles Michaelis evens his record at 8-8 to help the Cardinals get out of town with taking that series victory. Let's talk a little bit about Spencer Schwellenbach for a moment. This was one of those outings where it just seemed like he was doing all the things that's made him successful, but some pitches over the plate and some Cardinals hitters, I think, really scouting a strike thrower, were able to hit some solo home runs against him. 6 innings, 7 hits, 4 runs, all earned. No walks and 8 strikeouts for Schwellenbach, but the 3 home runs, that's the blemish for him, and that helped the Cardinals build an insurmountable lead.
Yeah, just very similar to the Bryce Elder start the day before. I mean, a lot of good stuff that you see from Bryce Elder when he's on, and then at times I just gave up too many home runs in this one. And 3 home runs, that's going to be hard to overcome. But, you know, the good thing I always say about Schwellenbach is even when he has some of these outings where he gives up some runs, runs into some home runs, still gave you 6 innings. And we talked yesterday a lot about this stretch of games the Braves are in right now, 17 games in 16 days straight without an off day. To be able to have your starter, you know, give you 6 innings like that is certainly meaningful. But, you know, just too many home runs, trouble with the long ball. Again, same thing as Bryce Elder yesterday. Some good stuff in there that you certainly like and you want to see more of, but just ran into too many strikes for Schwellenbach, something that we've seen a lot for him where maybe he has gotten into trouble at times. But all that stuff's still there. I mean, the 8 strikeouts, it's all still really good. Just, again, hard to overcome 3 home runs.
Yeah, and I think, again, and we've said this, we've used this term a lot, the on-the-job training that he's getting. I would much rather there be a guy with his arsenal that he has and his propensity for throwing strikes rather than trying to harness somebody's control and just looking and saying, oh, well, he throws really hard. If we could teach him to throw it over the plate and get him this pitch or that pitch, he might be effective. Spencer Schwellenbach is not a project pitcher. He's very polished, has a lot of mound presence, but he's still a young pitcher who's going to make some mistakes that big league hitters are going to capitalize on if he catches too much of the plate, and that seemed to be the problem at least a couple of those times. Sometimes they just hit out a good pitch. That's also one of the things that major league hitters do. But the 6 innings I do think is important because, as you know, Jake, just over 2 weeks more until the Braves get another off day. So you'll take what you can to be able to stretch your pitching staff out in a way that doesn't overtax it. And the 6 innings, that's kind of a requisite thing during a stretch like this to help keep you on task and on target there. Now, on the offensive side for the Braves, they did make a lineup change, one that you and I have talked about quite a bit, unable to do the things they needed to offensively as a group. But Matt Olson dropping down to the 5 spot, again, it's been a tough road for him. He's batting 130 in his last 32 games with 6 runs batted in. I hate to keep throwing all these stats out there, Jake, because, it's not the most fun to talk about, and no one's more aware of it than Matt Olson is. But, at this point, I think it had reached, and maybe it had been this way for a while, the time to just try something different, maybe try to take a little bit of pressure off of him, and just in doing so and in moving him around, just seeing if something just happens to fall into place for Matt Olson, because the Braves absolutely need him to get going. I think he's become the most important hitter if Atlanta's to turn this thing around in the second half, offensively speaking.
Because Riley's gotten going and Ozuna's been there all year long, I certainly agree with that. I think that's absolutely correct, that you have to get Matt Olson going now, and getting him back to that home run power that he has is just still incredible to look at the lack of home runs that he's gotten this year with all the hard contact that he makes. If you want to look at this series, he only struck out twice. So I think that's a step in the positive direction. Yep. Still not walking, made some hard contact, 2 hard hit balls in this game, another line out to center. I know he had a couple of those in this series, but it's not all bad luck. He's a tick off. He's either right on top of it or right under it. 2 times he grounded into a double play in this series, had more ground balls than we're ever really used to seeing from Matt Olson. So there is something, I'm sure it's something mechanical in his swing that he's trying to figure out, but he is certainly off of it just a little bit right now. That's causing him to not get the barrel on the baseball. His barrel rate's now under 10%. And look, that's still really good for a lot of hitters, but last year for Matt Olson, it's over 16% barrel rate. So again, he is just off making that good contact that we know that he can make. So hopefully he gets back to that, but I'm right there with you. I think now with Riley going, Ozuna going, and now with Ozzie Albies out, you really have to get Matt Olson being the number 4 or 5 hitter, wherever you want to put him, because now you're going to have to reshuffle the lineup again. You're going to have to get that home run power, RBI production back from Matt Olson.
Yeah, I mean, I'm calling him, and I have on the shows that I've been doing here on this Sunday, the linchpin for the Braves offense in terms of that power protection that you need to have one to the next, from Austin Riley to Marcell Ozuna to Matt Olson. If Matt Olson's in between the 2 righty hitters, that's also fine if he's rolling, but he hasn't been rolling for a while, hitting just .222 on the year, the 2 ground ball double plays. So even when he did get a chance in this game with some runners on base, unable to come through in this one. But the pace on the year now is 22 home runs and 72 runs batted in after having 54 homers and 139 RBI a year ago. It's just bizarre, the fall off that Matt Olson has dealt with, the cold spell that he's been in. And I know he's been working hard to try to get out of it, but for the Braves, I think they did have to start to try something different. And maybe, again, it's been that way for a while as well, because Austin Riley, I think he's all the way back. Marcell Ozuna was a deserving all-star and has been the Braves' best hitter. But Ozzie Albies' loss is going to make this much more difficult, especially when you factor in Michael Harris II is still not available. Jared Kelenic went through it a little bit, but is going to be a very important hitter for the Braves toward the top of the order now, particularly if you have Ozzie Albies out. I don't see any way that Kelenic is going to be moving out of the top couple of spots in this lineup, even when you get Harris back. It's going to be fascinating. But I guess one of the questions we could probably ask here, since we've got time, is Nacho Alvarez. I know a lot of times, Jake, you bring up a young hitter, you bury him toward the bottom of the lineup. I would almost say that this is a hitter that you might be tempted, based on his on-base skills, to try a little bit higher and put him in front of some proven big league hitters and just see if you can ride the hot hand there, because, look, you got nothing else going on really that's going the way that you want it to.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's certainly a possibility. Maybe not to start. Maybe to start, you put him in that 9 hole where you still kind of get him in front of those hitters and then just kind of get him acclimated. But then if he takes off and you're seeing him, take those walks and get on base, then certainly, I think you can take that shot with him just because of that profile, like we talked about earlier. It seems like a guy that's going to get on base 34, 35% of the time based on what we've seen at the minor league level. So, and it could be a long stint for him. We'll see. Obviously, he's going to have to produce, and we'll see what happens at the trade deadline. But with Ozzie out for 8 weeks, I mean, you should get a long look at Nacho Alvarez here and see what he can do. But he certainly profiles as somebody that you would want at the top of your order, somebody that's going to get on base for those big guys in the middle of the lineup to drive them in.
Yeah, and with all the things that have gone wrong for the Braves, offensively speaking, the lack of consistency, the injuries that continue to crop up. I mean, we haven't even brought up Ronald Acuna Jr. on this show. I know it's a lot of times we don't have to, we don't need to. It's kind of understood, it's implicit. But without him, that obviously put the Braves in an entirely different position in terms of their lineup construction as it was. Then you lose Harris. Now you lose Albies. This is going to be an interesting puzzle for Brian Snitker to put together. I'm sure the front office is going to go out and try to do what it can over the next, less than 10 days now, just over a week until the trade deadline. But until some help walks through the door, you got to work with what you got, which is why I would be interested to see if somebody with the skills and the hot streak, of course, of Alvarez might not just get maybe hot-shotted toward the top of the lineup because, if we're being honest, I don't know that I can find 8 other hitters that I'm thinking need to have more at-bats or plate appearances than Alvarez at this point. It says nothing of what the depth chart is all time or going forward or forever. It's just kind of a snapshot of where they are. That's kind of why I was thinking maybe, again, you just ride that hot hand and see what happens.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, you look at the bottom of the lineup now, it's 570, 574, 577 OPS. I mean, there's just not a lot to go to. And now you take Ozzie Albies out of there. I mean, yeah, I'm certainly, with that idea, with the way that Nacho Alvarez plays and his skill set and just ability to take a walk, get on base. And you might not think it looking at his frame. He's got a little bit bigger lower half. He's a fast guy too, somebody that can run a little bit. And that's another element of this Braves lineup that you're really missing without Acuna and Harris. And again, now Albies. I mean, those are the 3 guys that you expect to run the most. And that element has been just zapped from this Braves lineup. Yeah. So Alvarez can bring a little bit of that in his game as well.
Yeah, just a lot of things that this kid can do. Now, I would also say guard your expectations because they don't all need to be heaped on him. He's not coming in here to save the season or to revolutionize the Braves offense. It is going to take a lot of guys grabbing the rope and pulling it in the same direction to get this thing going. We're going to take a break, come back, though. We'll talk a little bit more about what's going on with the Braves with these injuries and, of course, the 3-game series they've got starting against the Cincinnati Reds and what looms for the rest of the month as the Braves, they're going to be without an off day for quite a while. How is that going to affect the things that are going on for them? We'll talk about that on the other side. With Stitch Fix, you get a stylist who understands your style, size, and budget, and they do all the shopping for you, which makes it the easiest way to update your wardrobe this season. Get that professional stylist that helps you find new on-trend favorites that work for you. And if you don't love something, you just send it back. Shipping and returns, exchanges, they're always free. Style that makes you feel as good as you look. Now's the best time to get started at stitchfix.com/MLB. Get $100 off. That's $25 off your first 4 fixes for a limited time. stitchfix.com/MLB for $100 off. stitchfix.com/MLB. Must redeem within 7 days of sign up, and this offer does not include kids fixes. I love sports, and I love them so much I never want them to stop. But as the playoffs have wound down in other sports, we have fewer games going through the summer, even if we've got baseball every day. The sports, they're just not quite sportsing like a lot of folks want them to. FanDuel, though, lets us keep the sports going whenever we want, because all we have to do is open the app, dream up the bets anytime that you're in the mood. This summer, FanDuel is hooking up all customers with a boost or a bonus daily. That's right, something for everyone every day all summer long. So head on over to FanDuel.com/lockedon and start making the most out of your summer. FanDuel, the official sports betting partner of Major League Baseball. Well, Jake, ahead for the Braves as they wrap up this first series, which was forgettable in many ways for Atlanta, losing 2 out of 3 to the St. Louis Cardinals with their 6-2 loss on Sunday. It's another club that is still hanging around in that wild card picture. One of the more, I think, exciting, young, on-the-rise teams out there because you've got talents like Elly De La Cruz, Hunter Green, who the Braves are going to be seeing in Game 1 of the series as well, the All-Star on the mound for Cincinnati. And it's not going to get any easier after that because you got 4 games against the New York Mets who've been surging, and you've got a trip to Milwaukee to take on the Central leading Brewers. That's what leads you up to the trade deadline. Jake, I know we talked about this yesterday, but I think it bears repeating. It's not going to get any easier for the Braves, and these 2 injuries that they just suffered through over this weekend and on Sunday, loss of Max Fried and Ozzie Albies, who's going to miss 2 months, if not more. That's not the kind of news that the Braves wanted to get as they go through this part of the schedule and as they get ready for the stretch drive.
Yeah, it's not an ideal situation for the Atlanta Braves. Again, as we started this postcast off talking about, you were hoping to get some good momentum going into the second half that they could hopefully get on a run, maybe catch the Phillies. And now it's just how do you maintain what you have at the moment and hang on to the wild card spot that you have. And look, there's still a lot of talent here, and there's still going to be some expectations in that clubhouse. They still expect to go out there and win, but it has just made things a lot harder on them now. And again, this is with the schedule that they have. A lot of teams that are battling for position, trying to get in that postseason with those extra spots. It's not an easy season for the Braves overall, and it's not getting any easier. The only good thing you can look at is you do have your two studs going in this series at the beginning, in Lopez and Chris Sale, and you're just going to really need to count on those two guys. And who would have thought that coming into the year, that you're really looking at Chris Sale and Ronaldo Lopez, carrying a team. As we talk about, the pitching has been so good, and it's what carried this Braves team to this point. And now you're really counting on two guys you got in the offseason to come in and pitch some good games to try to help the Braves, move past what was a rough weekend injury-wise and on the field, and get a winning streak going.
Yeah, and they're going to have to try to start one out on Monday. Ronaldo Lopez will get the ball there against Hunter Green. We'll talk more about that in a moment. Looking overall at what the Braves are going to try to do with their rotation, there was some conversation, idle chatter, whatever you want to call it, about the Braves not having enough pitching depth to start the season. Jake, I don't know about you. I don't think that could be any further from the truth. This was a club that went out and got two major league starters by getting Chris Sale and Ronaldo Lopez, with Spencer Strider, Max Fried, and Charlie Morton already gassed up and ready to go. You have Bryce Elder, who I know can be a bit of a mercurial, figure for folks, because it's either all good or all bad in the eyes of some, and that's okay, because usually by the time you get to 6, 7, and so on your depth chart, there's going to start to become some questions about these guys, whether it's Darius Vines or Alan Winans or Dylan Dodd or Spencer Schwellenbach pitched his way into the picture. I don't think a lot of folks expected him to become as important as he has been in the first half of the season. Injury to A.J. Smith-Shawver, the fact that you're still waiting on Ian Anderson and to a lesser extent Huascar Ynoa to pitch their way perhaps into the second half. There was a lot of depth there, but there's not a lot of teams that you can look down on the farm and say, okay, we lost Spencer Strider and Max Fried for whatever length of time. We're going to call up this guy, and that's going to fix it. The trade deadline can go a certain, way towards helping it out. But long story short, the Braves and their pitching depth has been tested. And Brian Snitker said this after the game. Depth can take you so far. Eventually, these things start to add up. And I think the Braves have certainly reached that point where this is all added up. And the answers and what it's added up to is something that the Braves are going to have a difficult time navigating over the next 2 months if they don't get some help and get some in a hurry.
Yeah, I mean, I don't think you can say the Braves – I don't know there's many teams out there that had the starting pitching depth the Braves had coming into this season. I mean, you just rattled off, 7, 8, 9, 10 names that you could use. But to your point as well, like you said, once you're getting into that depth and you're having to rely on that depth for long lengths of time, then it becomes to get exposed a little bit. I mean, nobody is carrying 7, 8 aces.
No.
You're just not having that many in your rotation and in your depth. And you can't really replace a Spencer Strider. Chris Sale has done a fantastic impersonation of that and tried to, but you would love to have that in addition to what you get to Spencer Strider. And you just don't have that.
No, you don't. But, you also have to work with what you've got until you get to the point where you can make trades. So to bring kind of all of this full circle, you weren't going to be able to make an April, May, or June trade, I don't think, that was going to amount to a lot. And in fact, I don't think there were too many teams out there looking to even entertain the idea of that, no matter really what they're being offered, if we're being honest. I just don't think that too many clubs are going to get talked into that. Putting that aside, though, we are now officially in that time. And with Max Fried on the 15-day IL, dealing with that forearm neuritis, he's going to be shut down from throwing until the pain or the discomfort, whatever you want to call it, subsides. And then they're going to ramp him back up. Fried said he hopes that that's soon. I still think, and I know we talked about this earlier, but to bring it all back to the trade deadline, if the Braves weren't already thinking about maybe finding somebody that could not only just get in their rotation and help out, but maybe pitch some meaningful innings for him in the postseason, I think they're definitely thinking about it now.
Yeah, as we kind of talked about at the beginning, Alex Anthopoulos is going to be looking at every possibility and what makes sense. I just think now starting pitcher has to move up the priority. Maybe you were just looking at it, and if it looked good, yeah, let's make a move. Now I almost feel like, okay, you have to make that a priority. It's a move that you almost have to make. And it doesn't have to be anything top of the rotation. That's going to be really hard to come by. But just to get somebody that can help you get through 162, maybe a middle of the rotation arm that can help you in a third, fourth game of a postseason. Hopefully, if the Braves get to that point, I think you at least have to make some sort of move like that just to give you some insurance.
Yeah, and you'd like to have that discussion. But, of course, here on the, 21st of July, we're not quite ready to have the discussion about lining up the postseason rotation. But if you're having one, you'd like to have Max Fried available for you for that. Ronaldo Lopez, meanwhile, will be starting on Monday. Chris Sale is going to take the second game. Braves will sort it out, I guess, in game 3, figure out where they're going to go from there. Lopez 7-3 with a 1.88 ERA. Hunter Green, meanwhile, has had himself a very nice season, racking up the strikeouts, was an all-star for Cincinnati, brings a 3.34 ERA into this start, just 6-8 on the year, though. Should be an interesting pitching matchup between these two gentlemen, and we'll see what the Braves are able to do with a Reds club that is going to try to keep itself in position and maybe be a surprise buyer. You just don't really know with some of these National League clubs at the moment. But 7:20 p.m. Eastern time is the first pitch at Truist Park as the Braves and Reds get things started on Monday. That's going to bring us to the end of this edition of the Braves Postcast. As always, we appreciate you riding along with us for all the discussions, good, bad, or indifferent. Make sure you subscribe to Locked On Sports Atlanta on YouTube. Leave us those likes and comments, share the show with a friend, and subscribe to Locked On Braves wherever you get your podcast. Once again, a tough weekend, a tough day for the Braves on the injury front, and, of course, dropping a series to the Cardinals. We'll re-rack this thing, be back with you on Monday, and keep it going here on the Braves Postcast. For Jake Mastroianni, I'm Grant McAuley. We will catch you next time, and until then, so long, everyone.